Okay, good morning, Lara.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Pretty good.
Okay, good to hear that. Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you for being here today, and I especially appreciate your time for allowing me to conduct an interview as part of my class requirement.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Okay, so before I will jump on the proper interview, I just would like to ask some initial questions as a briefing, as we could get the ball rolling. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So are you ready? You ready?
As ready as I can be.
Okay. Well, okay, Lara, how long have you been staying here in South Korea and who is with you here?
Man, I've been here forever. So, I first came in 2008.
Wow, 2008.
Yeah, and then I went back home for a little bit, for like almost a year, and then I came back. So it's been that long, and I'm here with my sister, but she wasn't here the whole time. I think she came maybe 6 years ago.
6 years ago. Wow, 6 years ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know.
All right. So, can you tell us a bit of background of your stay here with your sister?
So we both teach English at an academy. I don't know.
Okay, so you
What
just
do
like
you-
us, yeah. And you're like both English teachers.
Yeah,
right?
we're both English teachers here. I just came here on a whim almost. Like, I wanted to travel, and then I heard about being a teacher in different countries, and it happened really quickly, me coming to Korea, and then I thought I would only stay for a year. And look
Now
at me
look at you now.
now.
All right. Same as me, we really didn't know
Yeah.
plans, right? Ahead of us. Okay. Anyways, being a foreigner staying in South Korea, what is the sort of difficulty have you encountered while living here?
Well, definitely the language barrier, especially when I first got to Korea, because there were less resources to help with foreigners. I had to learn how to read Hangul fairly quickly because the transportation system, even though there would be English, for the most part, like buses and stuff would be in Hangul, so that was difficult. But nowadays, like 11 years later, there's so many more resources, so it makes it much easier. But it wasn't as easy before, yeah.
Okay, so what is the primary language that you use in communicating the fact that you're here in Korea?
Believe it or not, I speak English a lot.
Most of the time, right?
Yeah, I would say like 80%. If I had to speak Korean, it would be at a restaurant. Or it would be at like banks or offices, but even then they would speak English. So yeah,
So
I'm kind of like in a bubble.
Okay. All right, and but your preferred language here is what? What is your preferred language?
I mean, I prefer to speak English,
English.
but I wish I knew more Korean, but I get by. Yeah. If I really had to speak Korean, I think I could do survival Korean, but...
What is your native language?
Well...
Because, okay, tell us about that.
So, I guess I should have said that.
Yes.
So, I'm Filipino in my ethnicity, but I grew up in the States, so I feel like I speak 95% English, even with my family. Even if I spoke Tagalog, which is my family's native language, I would probably have some English words into there. So it's more of an understanding rather than speaking. Yeah.
Okay, can you tell us the specific difficulty that you have experienced considering the language barrier in communication?
In Korea?
Yeah, in Korea.
So a lot of things that would be easy back home, like administration stuff, like setting up your gas bill or opening up a cell phone account or
bank
account, or even understanding
the mobile banking. You've heard about it. It's all written in Korean.
Yes, and then
insurance
each time. Insurance. So in that case, I would need someone's help. So a lot of things is kind of like a dependency issue. Yeah. It's kind of like you're young, you know, and you can't do anything by yourself. So that would be the major difficulty. I think it was more so when, like, before, I would have to always ask like my co-teachers to translate something or to help me with doing, you know, even like things like taxes, and stuff like that.
Tax.
And sometimes some of the things are kind of like, you know, personal things, like going to the hospital or something. So that would be a major difficulty.
So how does it affect you in your daily life?
Well, it would just take longer to do things. It also makes you realize that you are willing to help people out more because so many people have helped me out, you know. So it's also, I guess, like a life lesson.
Yes.
Not just language.
Okay. Now let's move on to another question. And what coping mechanisms or strategies you have been using to counter the difficulties you encountered so far?
So as I said, like I've asked for help, but
do you also sometimes do the translating?
So
you know, the papago.
Yeah. So rather than asking for help,
people,
you can nowadays, or like more recently, you would have like resources of Google Translate or Papago or Naver Translate. So I would do that. Like you could take pictures and scan it and stuff like that. So that's much easier. But I didn't really have that before. And like, you know, now Naver Maps and some apps would be in English. So that helps. But also like photographic memory of like, okay, this means that, you know, like when you're doing something online or so that would be my coping mechanisms.
Okay, as you know, I also noticed that the way people think is strongly affected by their native language. You know, come to think of it, like in Korean, you must constantly think about whom you are addressing in terms of age, social standing, etc., to determine the correct politeness level, right? You know, they're using yo imnida or like isimnida so it's way different than other language.
That's true.
If you are addressing to like older than you, then you said 안녕하세요, right? But annyeong, just like that.
Yeah.
So we must know these things as well because we're living in Korea. Well, does language shape thought and is our thought changed when we speak a different language?
I definitely agree that our thought changes. I think, like I mentioned before, I feel like it's did the egg or the chicken come first? Because I don't, you know, it both kind of affects each other. But yes, coming to Korea, I guess I never thought of having to wonder how old a person is before trying to talk to them. Because I guess in English, well, we do have, you know, ma'am and sir, and we wouldn't, there would be different phrases that you would use to someone that you are close with, but here it's almost as if you need to know before you actually speak to them.
You need to know their age.
And that was weird for me because
that's so weird.
When you first come, they're like, "Oh, how old are you?" And it's at first it's almost like that's too personal. I guess in English
term,
in America, it would be like, "Why are you asking me?" That's one of the first things. And so that took me aback. But then I realized they're not doing it to be nosy. They're doing it so they know how to address you, which is totally respectable, you know, because it's like they want to be in a way that they show manners. So with the thought, I think that's one of an example of how your thought changes, because it's like you're thinking about where they are in relation to you.
Also, I also think that every single language is structurally unique. Just like in Korea, you know, they have, for example, it's grammatically different. Like, I go to school, so they would say like, in English it's always subject and verb, and then object will be the last. And then in here it's the way around. Like I go to school, so 저는
Yeah.
학교 가요.
Yeah.
So meaning like object, subject, and always at the last will be the verb.
Yeah.
So it's also like wow. I mean, language is more involved than just thought and communication. Right.
Yeah, it's so much more involved.
Mhm.
Just like what we were talking about with the asking of the age. So
Age,
that part of it is kind of like part of their culture too, right? So it's not just the words that you use; it's how it relates to your daily
The daily life. Yeah. Culture, traditions, lifestyle,
exactly.
those things like
even just priorities.
yeah,
You know?
priorities.
So like I think we were talking about before about how like I was mentioning with when I was talking about meditation, there would be like forest bathing in Japan or
Forest bathing.
yeah, in Scandinavian countries, they would have a specific word for that because it's part of their mentality, their daily life, and yet in English we have to say the actual action, right?
Yes.
So because it's not a vocabulary on its own. So language shows the priority in the culture's life.
Priority, you're right. So from learning another language, I also have learned to think in different ways. You do? So but now it's very true that language had an influence on how we see the world, and also that some ideas can be expressed in the same way. But do you support the idea that language determines and shapes the way we think?
In a way, yes, but I don't think it's the only factor. Yes, because language would affect the degrees of the way that we say things, the nuances, the
yeah.
way that we understand what someone else is saying. Language can also determine how much of what we mean is being absorbed through the other person, because you can just be saying what you think that person is understanding, but that person may not be understanding you. So yes, it shapes the way that we think because of the way that we express ourselves. But I think that it's not the only thing, because a lot of the things that we do express are non-verbal.
Non-verbal, yes.
Part of just things that are not said, body language, all those things are a big factor too.
We must consider those things as
Yeah.
Okay, so now when people learn another language, they learn the way of thinking the speakers of the language have. So do you agree that if we have affinity towards other language so towards the people speaking their language, it will help us acquire the language easily?
Yeah, I would think that you would be more intrinsically motivated to learn that language if you're really eager to communicate with them. That's not to say that I'm not eager to speak Korean, but sometimes it's just like almost if you're not in the environment to learn, it almost is like more difficult. So it's not only the affinity, which I think yes, it would make such a big difference if you are motivated to learn that language, but also if you surround yourself in learning that language would probably help more. But yeah, I think intrinsic motivation is a big factor.
Yes. So like this one you told me before, what was that the word it's really different, the word in French.
Oh yeah, just like the way that you would well for this it helps us acquire, like, it would be more of like how our thoughts changed. Or it's kind of like, okay, would language shape our thought, or does thought shape our language? Because there are some I don't know, tribes or cultures that would think of different ways of saying, like greetings.
Oh, greetings.
Like different greetings, or or just the way that we say things. When I was saying, you would say, I went to dinner with a neighbor, and then so I feel like sometimes English speakers have that, like, they don't want to say too much about themselves, but then like if you said it in French or Spanish, you would say I went to dinner with a neighbor, but you would have to say if it was he or she, right?
The feminine and the masculine, like gender.
Yeah. So then it would kind of sometimes reveal more information, even though you don't want to. And I guess in English, in a way, it's like I don't want to.
Yeah, you want to. I don't want to reveal it.
So and that goes back to the age thing. It's
the age thing.
Why are you asking me how old I am? So it's kind of like if someone doesn't understand that culture, it's almost as if it's impolite to ask.
Impolite, yeah.
But if you understood it, then it's more like of a respect thing. And I think in that way, language could be lost in translation, because if people didn't understand the culture. So it kind of goes back to how you can have affinity over a language, but almost as if you don't know about that culture,
we should know the culture.
Yeah, it would be hard to actually appreciate it, because sometimes you may think it's too harsh. Or maybe even too demanding.
Or it's too bossy, or she's so bossy, things like that.
Yeah.
We need to understand that.
Yeah.
That would allow us to understand various nuances, right?
Yeah.
Different cultures and languages.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
All right, thank you so much, Lara, for answering those questions. I really appreciate your time today.
No, it's my pleasure.
All right.